This is episode 17, now the long form of risk assessment types. I wanted to take one example scenario and show you the 3 different types of assessments we could do for the same scenario. So number 1, we talk about the qualitative assessment of the scenario. So as you can see now on the screen, we're pulling up just a worksheet and we're going to kind of map out a process and a scenario, and then we'll show you some diagrams on that as well in terms of what the system looks like and what key factors are we looking at in each assessment. So we block in this exchanger and we have a potential for thermal expansion. This is a chlorine vaporizer. If we're looking at it in a qualitative assessment, we know in industry that chlorine has a high vapor expansion coefficient. Therefore, it's fairly likely if we block it in, we're going to have a release. A qualitative way to look at it is to say, do we run this operation often? And have we ever blocked it in? People in the room will be able to tell us how often, when we block it in, do we have a release, and how big is that release normally? We also can use some incidents in industries and different things to define a magnitude for us that we're evaluating. So let's say, as you're looking at the worksheet here, we say that we release chlorine from this, and it's a relatively small leak. Now you're seeing the risk matrix. As we show the risk matrix and we show the severity for that risk matrix, we're talking about a small release is an S3, which is a recordable. So someone may say, hey, if we had a small release of chlorine, we have a recordable. This has actually happened in the past. That's the assessment that we're going to use for this team. That's a completely team-based assessment, and it's qualitative. We really just kind of guesstimated and used an assumption based off of what we've done in the past. You're now seeing a second type of assessment if we reviewed this same scenario from a semi-quantitative perspective. So I'm showing a chart now that says, hey, there's 2 delineation points. If we release more than 25 pounds of chlorine, we call that a potential hospitalization. If we release less than 25 pounds of chlorine, we call that a lost work time injury, okay? So we may review the scenario, and we may also end up at a lost work time injury from this release from thermal expansion. But we're now sort of refining down, and we're giving an idea to the team of what magnitudes are we talking. It makes it very easy for someone in the room to say, no, we definitely would release more than 25 pounds of this. So as we're showing now in the worksheet, this is how you would document that semi-quantitative assessment. We would put in the assessment that it's thermal expansion and release, just like we did for qualitative, but we would also denote that the team analyzed the fact that we're releasing less than 25 pounds of chlorine. So therefore, we came up with the risk assessment that we did and the severity that we did. Lastly, we want to look at a quantitative assessment for the same scenario. And in the quantitative assessment, you'll see what we did is we took the pressure, and we're going to detail all of this in the statement, the pressure, the temperature, what all the scenarios were, where people were in the area, and we ran a model based on what would happen for a thermal expansion. We calculated how much we would release and how far that would go. So you can see the expansion results calculation form, and you can also see the graph of the dispersion model. We did this in the Aloha software, which is a free software you can use, that show how far out this chlorine can go. Now it's very easy for the team to take a look at the scenario and say, would someone be within the area where this cloud is going to be, and how much are we actually releasing? Are we at a threshold that is higher than maybe when we did the semi-quantitative? We learned we're more than 25. So this is a quantitative assessment, as you can see, is based more so on numbers and more so on the actual refined scenario. As I mentioned in the short form, this can become kind of cumbersome if you do this for every scenario. So that's why a lot of companies who have complex processes and hazardous processes settle on a semi-quantitative approach, and then for high hazard scenarios, they do a LOPA, which is a more quantitative approach in addition to the HAZOP. This isn't one size fits all for everyone, so you may take a look at some of these and say there's a good reason for you to use this different risk assessment type for your plant, even though maybe the complexity doesn't fit and you may have your reasonings. There's nothing in the standard that tells us what type we have to use. Really, it's find the best fit that fits for you. As always, you can check out more content from us on the website, on our LinkedIn, our YouTube, and our Facebook.